Today's guest on A Life and a Living is Michelle Dickinson. Now, Michelle is a very, very recognized and well-known mental health advocate. She is also very successful as a TED speaker, and she is the author of a memoir, Breaking Into My Life, which was the story of Michelle growing up with a mother who suffered dreadfully from bipolar and the impact that it had on the mother, obviously, a family, and Michelle in particular, and how it impacted her in the early stages of her life, and also how it continued to impact her as she has developed throughout her life. Michelle has also had a very successful career in the corporate world, but now she works exclusively in the whole area of how to deal with mental health issues in the workplace. And that's really interesting for anybody who's leading teams, because very often what happens is that we only see the issue with mental health when it blows up. But what she talks about here is how we can identify some of the signs of it, how we can cultivate a culture whereby people will feel free, that they can open up about it, and how then you can leverage the resources within the company to make sure that we're doing something about it. So there's an awful lot to be learned. And in this day and age where mental health has become much more a topic that we're all we're more comfortable, I was going to say very comfortable, but perhaps not very comfortable, but more comfortable talking about, well, then this is something that we really need to address. And as you know, if you're leading a team, if you're managing a team, you really do have to understand that it is your responsibility to do something about it. You do not have to be the clinician, you do not have to be the psychologist or psychiatrist, but you need to be aware of it. And that starts with actually building a good rapport and building trust in the team. So this is really, really well worth listening to. And Michelle, you go to her site, there's a lot of good resources on that, and all the information is in the show notes. If you want to listen to other great content, we've had some great people on the show. You can go to the website, www.johnmurphyinternational.com, or you can reach out to me at john@johnmurphyinternational.com. But in the meantime, sit back and enjoy the interview with Michelle Dickinson. Michelle, thank you so much indeed for being with us on the podcast. It's a great honor to have you all the way from New Jersey.
Thanks for having me on today, John.
No, I mean, you're a passionate mental health advocate. I know that you're a TED speaker as well. And you've also been you're the author of your own memoir, which I think I'm correct in calling it, Breaking Into Life, which is about your story, which I know you talk about in that the impact that you're living with a bipolar mother and the challenges that brought, and that you had some challenges yourself. But I one of the things I found actually quite moving was reading, kind of the excerpt from where you talk about the day as a child. I can't remember exactly what age you were, but you were going to go to school. You came down and you were really excited because it'd been a bit challenging the time before that with your mother. And then you were going to school. You're so excited about excited about meeting all your pals. And then your mother wasn't well, and your dad was saying, well, you stay at home, Michelle. And it was just the awful disappointment of that. And I could really feel the way you expressed it. I could really feel your disappointment. What was it like living in that environment?
Yeah, I refer to this as the roller coaster years of my life. It was really challenging. My her mood was so volatile. Suffering from bipolar disorder, she would have the mania, which would have her very excited and very happy. And then she would have the depression. And then that would be really a dark, dark period where there was nothing you could do to pull her out of it. It was hard.
Yeah. And when you look back on that now, and I know you're looking at it through the lens of an adult, but when you look back at that now, I mean, how does that make you feel? And also, how did that shape you to become the woman that you did become? Because you also had a very successful career in the corporate world before you, and we'll come on and talk about what you're doing now. But when you look back on it, how does it make you feel to reflect upon it, and how did it shape you?
Yeah, I think looking back on it now, I mean, I'm a believer, John, that everything happens the way it's supposed to because it leads you where you're supposed to be. So I have peace with it. It was not easy. It was very hard. And I kind of had moments throughout my life where I felt cheated, that I didn't have that carefree childhood, that my family life was so difficult. Like, why was it so difficult when my friends were having, fun growing up? But I believe that it shaped me and gave me this passion to help people and really eradicate the stigma and really help there be more understanding about mental health, because I saw it firsthand. There's a lot of ways it shaped me. Good, some bad, right? Like, it taught me resilience. It taught me extreme empathy and compassion for people suffering. Like, I don't want to see people suffer. There is nothing more painful than watching your mother cry and not being able to console her and help her to stop her upset. So that really created this deep sense of me wanting to not have people around me suffer and do what I can. So those are the positive things. Some of the not so positive things is I get lost in caring for people, because I was groomed as a little girl to put my own needs on the shelf and really focus on creating as much comfort for others. So as a woman, I'm 48 years old. I still struggle with that,
Right, okay. And I mean, you've also been quite open about your own kind of mental health struggles.
Yes.
I mean, is that something that you believe that you have got on top of, or is it still work in progress?
Oh my goodness, we're living through the Corona days,
Yeah.
and my friends in Korea coin it the Corona blues. I'm okay. I have learned how to navigate it and how to deal with it. I never expected that I would be dealing with anything. I am adopted, so I thought, I'm immune. My mom wasn't my biological mom. I'm not going to have that. And then a life event came along. I dealt with the divorce of a marriage that I was in a relationship for 19 years with this man. And I dealt with depression, and for the first time, and it just reminded me, nobody's immune. Life events can affect all of us in different ways. And so I learned coping mechanisms. I learned healthy things to do to take care of myself and really navigate that. And so I feel like I'm okay right now. Like, I try really hard to stay active. I think movement and exercise have always helped me, and I lean into that when I'm starting to feel a little off.
Yeah. And I mean, you're successful, as I mentioned, you had a successful career in the corporate world.
Yeah.
In the pharmaceutical industry. It was J&J, wasn't it, that you were with?
That was my last company, but I
That
had
was the
been with
last
a
company.
series. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, but you had to spend a number of years in the corporate world. And how do you think that that impacted you in your corporate career? So, two questions. One is, how did it impact you, and also, was the corporate world understanding of it?
Yeah, I really appreciated my experience there, because I was part of a leadership team that was driving real change to eradicate the stigma in the workplace. So I was really proud of that work, because we were trying to create true inclusion for people with invisible disabilities. And I think any company who wants to be attractive needs to address all kinds of disabilities, and mental illness is one of them. So I was really proud of that. My unique experience was contingent upon my direct manager and how my manager handled me having the courage to, disclose that. And I will say that the success of any organization is the face of the company, and those are the people leaders. And so some people leaders were better than others, and you can only have a remit and programs in place, but what you really need are to have those leaders who are behind it and demonstrate that level of compassion and empathy.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting. I remember years ago thinking, you heard the line being trotted out where, people leave managers, not organizations. And for quite a period of time, I would have thought, okay, well, it's a nice line, but I'm not quite sure if I actually buy it. But I think, but now I do, and I certainly have for quite some time as well. And the data would also prove that to be true.
Yeah.
That people, and I know in my own coaching business that because I coach a lot of leaders, the leaders who get the most out of their team and really optimize the potential of teams are those leaders that have really a strong sense of the humanity of the people that they're dealing with, and are proactive in that, and are preemptive of that. And I would always make the point that, and even when I was in the corporate world before I started my own business, when I'd coach people, I would coach them about their entire life, not just their
Yes.
working life. And my argument, and some people initially would kind of think that's a bit odd. Why are you doing that when it's just the job? So, it's not my fault that all of you turns up for work. I mean, it is all of you that turns up, and
Yeah.
none of us can separate ourselves that
Right.
kind of simply that that's the work me. So I leave the other me outside the door. But when you look and the work that I know that you're going into organizations now
Hmm.
to kind of help them to, kind of be better at dealing with mental health, because to a large extent, very often when organizations are dealing with, but they're dealing with it when it's happened,
Yeah.
right? When
Yeah.
suddenly it has blown up, somebody is kind of keeping a lid on it, all of that, but then it blows up and it's now a major problem, which always
Right.
seems to be that you're kind of dealing with it late. So
Right.
how do you work with companies to really get them to be proactive in terms of
Yeah.
preventing it?
Yeah. And that's the key. The key right there is the proactive, um, mental health and well-being in general. Like what are the resilience tools that employees need to have in place so they can manage their stress better, so it doesn't escalate? And there's so much companies can do, and I witnessed a lot of amazing initiatives and efforts that were done at my company, that are easy to be copied. One of them is just a simple remit from the top levels of the organization that we will be an inclusive and understanding organization for people with mental illness. And we're no longer going to ignore or not talk about that, because like you said, you can't expect people to not bring their full selves to work. Gone are the days where we expect people to put their game face on and show up and
Yeah.
add another layer of stress on top of that because they have to now conceal a mental illness. So I think having leadership on board, reviewing your policies around invisible disabilities and physical disabilities, and how, what supports are in place, but then, conditioning the environment to just have more open dialogue. What does it mean to have stress and anxiety? How does that impact you? What are some tools that you can be doing so that you can mitigate that before it escalates?
Mm.
And it's not just a yoga class. It's not just mindfulness. It's beyond that. It's real connection between a leader and an employee. It's cultivating trust so that when something happens in my life, I have a trusted relationship with my leader, and I can say to them, "Hey, listen, I need a mental health day." And I just do. I'm dealing with a lot of stuff, and they're met with a level of compassion that they deserve.
Yeah. I mean, because so many who say, okay, well, we want to have a kind of a very different culture. And, the things that you kind of typically talk about, oh, we'll put ping pong tables in and bean bags in, and therefore, and that's it. But for a manager listening today, Michelle, what should they be looking out for? They've got a team of people.
Mm-hmm.
They are responsible for that team of people, for those individuals and for them collectively. What
Uh-huh.
should they be looking out for to actually see the signs of it? So that
Yeah.
and then what should they do about it? Because some people feel uncomfortable about kind of raising it when it hasn't been said. That's one part. And the second part of that is that in the Me Too world, and I hear this from some people,
Mm-hmm.
is that when coaching, saying, well, I'm kind of nervous about, if it's a male boss, or it doesn't make any difference, or female boss,
Yeah.
but that one getting into a room together, because gosh, now we're actually exposing ourselves to accusations if something goes somehow
Yeah.
wrong. But so
Yeah.
what should people be looking for, and how should they be doing, what should they be doing about it?
It goes back to what you said earlier, and that is, as a leader, you have to treat the entire person as the person. It's important. And you have to do your part to build trust. If you do not have trust in place, then you're going to be looking at them as a subject that you're evaluating. And I think the biggest mistake we all make is we think we have to play the role of the clinician, and we do not need to play the role of the clinician. We just need to be that trusted person and be connected to them in a way that you can pick up if there's something off, and you can ask them, how are you doing? There's nothing wrong with that. As a leader too, I think it's super important that you're very well versed in all the resources that your company is providing. A lot of companies have EAP, there are support groups, there are external
So
mental
what's
health.
EAP?
It's an employee assistance program
All right.
that
Okay.
an employee can call if they're in crisis
All
or
right.
if they
Okay.
need
Yeah.
support. what mental health benefits are available. I just think that leaders should know where to direct their employee if they need support. They shouldn't take the burden on of trying to be the clinician and get in and analyze and detect, oh, you're demonstrating symptoms of. That's not your role. Your role is to listen, to be there for them, and to connect them to a place where they can get support.
Yeah, I think what you said there, I think it's actually so important, Michelle, because, the fundamental of all of this is about trust, because it is about building that trust, because you can have all the processes in place, all the resources in place and all of that. But if you don't have trust, the conversation won't happen.
Yes.
And I think that that's the important. The other thing that I think on that is something that I really focus in on with clients is, when I talk about coaching, and actually very often people kind of use the word managing and coaching interchangeably when they are fundamentally very different conversations. And if you say to somebody, well, do you think you should coach your people? I mean, nobody's going to say, no, I don't think I should coach my people, right?
Right.
Everyone say yes. So it's a bit of kind of motherhood and apple pie question. But then you say, well, do you do it? And very often the answer is, well, no, I don't really, right? So, yeah. And if you're not having coaching, and very often the reason they don't do it is because they don't actually have a structure in their own head to how to run that conversation. And that's, I'd work with clients to kind of give them that structure, because it's not rocket science. But if you don't have a process, then you can't know what you don't know. But the coaching conversations is where you build the trust.
Yes.
Because that's where the coaching conversation is not about the manager, it's about the individual. Yes. And that's where the trust gets built. I don't think if the only thing you have is well, here are your objectives and let's just talk about those, that's a very transactional relationship. And I don't think you build the relationship there. So managers need to embrace the coaching. Would that be something that you've experienced?
Absolutely. And I think when I reflect on my own career around the managers that were coaches and managers, there's like night and day difference between how they show up for me, whether, and it's simple communication and compassion and really getting into my listening that has me feel connected to that person. But that takes effort. That takes something. That takes, putting stuff aside and just really focusing on the individual. It does. And it requires some time and investment. But let me tell you, if you have a loyal employee, you're going to have that employee working, and you're going to have that employee wanting to work through and navigate what they're dealing with so they can get back to their job. Yeah. So, it all comes down to trust, loyalty, compassion, empathy. Human connection is what it comes down to.
Yeah. I mean, I always say that, you will get 10 times more out of coaching your people than you will out of managing your people.
Totally.
I think it is really important. I mean, at the moment, we're in the middle of the whole COVID and the stress that's bringing at all sorts of different levels. And one of the things I find, it's obviously distressing, but one of the things I find fascinating as well is that unlike other major events like the market crash in 2007, 2008, which did have a global impact, but it did have a global impact across a certain sector of the community, right? Whereas the COVID actually has just impacted everybody.
Everyone.
It doesn't matter if you've got, you've got the richest man in the world or you're living on the streets. It's equal, and it's the great leveler.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I find is bringing its own stress, and you would know what I'm talking about. We touched on it earlier. I did a webinar recently for an organization, and it was around this whole thing about how you manage people remotely and how you manage working from home. And we had a Q&A afterwards. 80%, because I went back and I listened to it, 80% of the questions, right, were all about, I'm working from home, I'm trying to school my children, and I'm trying to do my job, and we're all in the house, and I'm just under the most enormous 80% of the questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was staggering. And I know from working with clients the pressure they're under.
Yeah.
What can be, and this will likely lead in many cases to serious mental health issues, right?
For sure.
What can people do who are in that situation? Because, and I know there's no simple answer, right? For starters, before I finish the question, but what can they do to actually help themselves?
Yeah. So there's two parts here. I'm going to answer it from the employer perspective and the employee perspective. So employers have such an incredible opportunity right now to show up for their people and build loyalty that's going to last for a very long time. So you can manage your people remotely, or you can care for them. You could do things for them that ease the strain that they're living through, and they will remember that for a very long time. So I'm just going to say that and put it out there. Whatever that looks like, a basket of oranges to in-home childcare. I don't know what it looks like, but care for your people now. It's important. Mm-hmm. As for folks who are struggling, if that is the norm, right? I have to be a working mom. I have to school my children. My husband is working. We're all working. We're all in the same four walls. Yes, there's a lot that can be done. You could create physical spaces that really designate certain spaces in your home for certain activities. You can make sure that you're taking care of yourself. You can get enough sleep. You can just really turn off the news, focus on your well-being, take family walks together, just do things that are going to keep you healthy. Because if you feel like you're out of control because you're not taking care of yourself, it's going to be just totally amplified. So try to get up and get an exercise in, do something for yourself, create some structure in your life where certain times you're going to do certain things, and those things are going to help. But most importantly, physical zones. So your children know if we're in this room, we're relaxing. If we're in this room, we're exercising. But having that structure is really going to help sort of, create some support for your family.
Yeah. Because I think it's going to be a big issue, because I think for particularly, I coach a lot of women who are in senior positions or who own businesses. And the one common trait that all of them who've got children is that even in the best of times, they have this guilt about being at work and kind of being a mother and how you actually, but then this situation just amplifies that by a multitude. So right. I think it is challenging. The other thing that you talk about is you talk about bringing our authentic selves to work.
Yeah.
Now, I understand the words.
Yes.
But tell me what you actually mean by that and how we can actually do that.
Yeah. So you need an environment that you feel comfortable doing that. That's the first step. You need a culture that is going to be accepting of the full person. Right now, I think a lot of cultures have some work to do around that. So when I say bring your authentic selves to work, it's having the ability to feel comfortable doing that. It's not, to my point before, it's not about putting your game face on and pretending you're not dealing with, severe depression and you're just trying to get through your day. It's the ability to show up to the best of your ability and be yourselves, and ask for support if you need it. So there's a lot that can be done to condition an environment so that is possible. But you have to also be aware if it's not a welcoming environment, you can't be that authentic self. So an employee has a choice to make. If I can't tell people that I'm dealing with depression, is this the place I want to work? Is this the place I want to call my employer? So opportunity is right there, right? Like, what is it going to take to retain good talent and make sure that people feel cared for? Because you certainly wouldn't do that if someone rolled up in a wheelchair. You really wouldn't. You would say, okay, let me know how I can accommodate you so we can get the best out of you, and you get to be a contribution, and we get to thrive as a company.
But it's actually getting people comfortable with having the conversation, because as you say, if it was a wheelchair, it's obvious, and I just do it because
right.
I kind of know how to do that.
Right.
With the mental health, it's not obvious.
Right.
And in many cases, it can almost be easier to ignore.
Yes, for sure. So look the other way. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's for managers who are leading people. I think it is, to your point, I think it is looking at them as the total individual,
right,
and creating that atmosphere of trust.
Right.
And that's the manager's responsibility, almost irrespective of the culture of the organization. The
Right.
individual manager can create culture within their own team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, leaders who care for their people, they just stand out head and shoulders
Yeah,
above other leaders. Like I just remember my own experience and the leaders who were really like the beacons of light in my division. They're the ones where you're like, God, I love to work for that guy. Like I know he really cares about his people. He's always extending himself. He's right there when people need support. Like it's a no-brainer. Just do
yeah.
the right thing and be a human being first instead of only focusing on an employee as an employee number and a deliverable.
Yeah.
um,
And it's not by accident that those same leaders are the high performers.
totally.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
actually do, because they get the best out of they get the best out of their people, because
Yeah.
they also demonstrate a level of vulnerability themselves. And I think that leaders need to
Yes.
actually do that. It can't be the veneer, of kind of I am perfect and I know everything. It's actually about
Right.
being vulnerable with them. So,
Yeah.
Michelle, this is great stuff. I could talk for a long time about that, but I want to respect your time. Before we can share with people where they can go and get in contact with you, can I ask you, Michelle, you're a book other than your own that's had a major impact upon you?
Yeah, I mean, God, there's so many. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. But I think the one that resonates right now for me the most dealing with COVID is Loving What Is by Byron Katie, because she
Oh,
teaches you that resisting reality creates our own upset. So when you can just love what is, be with what's going on, you bring yourself a lot more peace.
oh, that's a new one to me. I haven't come across that before.
It's really good.
That definitely goes on my list. And the second question is daily rituals.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan, and I heard from my group that I'm a part of a powerful book by Hal Elrod called The Miracle Morning.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I love The Miracle Morning because it's that little bit of time you can steal for yourself before you start your day, and you can do simple savers. They're called savers, where you spend a few minutes in silence. You do your affirmations, you visualize, you get that exercising in, you read to learn something new, and then you are journaling. And in my journal, I like to do my 3 gratitudes. So
Okay.
that's a really important routine for me.
And as a matter of interest, what do you believe the rituals do for you?
Yeah, so the rituals, honestly, they set me off on the right foot. I mean, when you start your day taking care of yourself and getting your focus straight on what you're going to do and what matters and your bigger vision for yourself, we can all be hamsters on a wheel. We can
Hmm.
all just do that. But if you get connected to your higher goals and your higher aspirations, it brings so much more meaning to the activities that you perform throughout the day.
Yeah,
So I
I
think for
agree with
me, it
you.
just gets me connected. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think it just kind of kickstarts your day, and I think it puts you in the right frame of mind. And we recharge our phones and recharge all the other appliances that we have. You've got to figure out a way of how you're going to recharge ourselves, because during the
Yeah,
day we actually
absolutely.
do kind of deplete that as we go. Michelle, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast here. Where can
You're
people get in
welcome.
touch with you? We'll put in the show notes, but if they're listening, let them direct them where they can go.
Sure, sure. I have a website for my company, my mental health company, Trifecta Mental Health. It's www.michelledickinson.com. And I also am on Instagram at Michelle Dickinson 71. On my website, you can find out about all the programs that I'm doing. I'm working with first responders, and I'm also working with corporate culture. So I thrive on making a difference around mental health. So reach out to me.
Well, your passion for it and your advocacy for it, that really does come across. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, John.
Pleasure.